Picture this: a coastal village in 9th century England, dawn breaking over thatched roofs, smoke curling from morning fires. Then the horizon darkens. Not with storm clouds, but with sails. Dozens of them. Striped, blood-red, bearing down like the fingers of some ancient god reaching across the water. Within hours, every man who could hold a sword is dead or dying, their blood soaking into the same earth they'd plowed just yesterday. But here's the thing that'll make your skin crawl. For the women left behind, the real nightmare was only just beginning. Because what the Vikings did to the wives of defeated warriors wasn't just brutal, it was methodical, calculated, and woven so deeply into their culture that they didn't even consider it cruelty. They called it justice. Let's talk about what actually happened when Viking raiders finished their killing. The sagas, those blood-soaked Norse stories written down centuries later, are peculiarly silent on certain details, which should tell you something right there. When medieval writers known for describing decapitations in loving detail suddenly get vague, you know something truly horrifying lurks in the gaps. But archaeological evidence, scattered chronicle entries, and the occasional unflinching passage in texts like the Annals of Ulster paint a picture that is somehow worse than any Hollywood version you've ever seen. When a warrior fell, his household became what the Norse called *retlaus*, without rights, without protection, without even the dignity of mourning. His widow wasn't a grieving woman anymore. She was an object, a transaction waiting to happen, a problem to be solved through the cold efficiency of Viking pragmatism. The most disturbing part? The Vikings had an entire vocabulary for this. *Conor Hernegar, *women taken in war. Not kidnapped, mind you. *taken*, as if they were grain from a storehouse or silver from a church. Some were loaded onto longships, still wearing the blood of their husbands, transported across gray seas to places like Idebe, that sprawling Danish trade hub where you could buy anything from amber to human beings. Others never left their homeland at all, but their lives transformed so completely they might as well have been carried to another world. The wife of a defeated English thane might find herself the property of the very man who split her husband's skull just hours earlier, now expected to grind his grain, bear his children, and pretend the past had been erased like footprints in snow. But here's where it gets truly twisted. Some of these women were considered *lucky*, because at least they'd been noticed. At least someone had decided they had value beyond the auction block. The high-status captives, the daughters of earls or widows of chieftains. They became pawns in a game so cynical, it makes modern politics look wholesome. Viking jarls would forcibly marry these women in ceremonies that had all the trappings of legitimacy witnesses, oaths, even gifts, but everyone involved knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't marriage. This was conquest wearing a wedding veil. By taking a noble woman as a wife, a Viking leader could claim her lands, her people, her entire bloodline as his own. Instant legitimacy, instant authority. And if she wept through the ceremony, if she refused to speak the words, well, that was just inconvenient. Her consent was about as relevant as a chicken's opinion on becoming dinner. The *Laxdæla saga* mentions these arrangements almost casually, describing how Norse settlers in the British Isles would take wives from among the defeated as if discussing crop rotation. But strip away the saga as romantic gloss, and you re-looking at systematic subjugation dressed up as diplomacy. These women became living symbols of their people's defeat, forced to share beds with the men who destroyed everything they'd known. And gods forbid they bore sons, because those children would grow up torn between worlds Norse by blood, conquered by memory, trusted by neither side, but useful to both. The Vikings understood something that modern empires took centuries to learn. You don't just conquer land, you conquer lineages. You insert yourself into the family tree so thoroughly that resistance becomes fraught with the terrible complexity of destroying your own children as heritage. The really nauseating detail? This strategy ** worked **. In Normandy, in Ireland, in parts of northern England, Viking DNA and culture fused with local populations precisely because of these forced unions. Centuries later, genealogists would trace noble lines back through these marriages, treating them as legitimate political alliances rather than what they actually were: systematic reproductive violence. The women who endured this weren't building bridges between cultures through some beautiful multicultural exchange. They were being used as bridges, walked over again and again, until their own identities dissolved into the weight of what crossed them. And Viking society looked at this arrangement and called it *order*, called it *stability*, called it anything except what it was. Now let's descend deeper into this particular circle of medieval hell, because if you thought forced marriage was as dark as it got, you haven't met the *ryle*. This Old Norse word means slave, but it carries a weight that the English translation barely touches. To become *ryle* was to be unmade as a human being. You weren't just unfree, you were uncounted, unnamed, unremembered. For thousands of women captured in Viking raids, this was their destination. Not death, not even marriage, but something worse: permanent hereditary nothingness. Here's what makes Viking slavery particularly stomach-turning. It was an industry. This wasn't opportunistic enslavement, some occasional side effect of warfare. The Vikings ran what amounted to a sophisticated international human trafficking operation, and captured women were among their most profitable commodities. The ships that returned from raids on Anglo-Saxon England or Slavic territories were just loaded with silver and weapons. Their holds were packed with human cargo. The Irish chronicles describe raids where a great prey of women was taken, which is about as chilling a phrase as medieval Latin can produce. These captives were marched to trading posts like Dublin, which by the 10th century had become the Amazon prime of the slave trade. Efficient, profitable, and utterly devoid of mercy, Dublin's slave markets deserve their own horror documentary. Picture wooden pens where women and children were displayed like livestock, examined for teeth and strength and childbearing potential. Viking traders would sell these captives to *anyone, *other. Norse settlers needing farm labor, Irish chieftains looking to humiliate their enemies by purchasing their women even. Muslim merchants from Al-Andalus and the Abbasid Caliphate who traveled to this cold, wet island city, specifically for access to European slaves. A Saxon woman who'd started the year as a farmer's wife might end it in Morocco, speaking neither the language nor understanding how the world had tilted so violently that she'd fallen off the edge of everything she knew. And the Vikings who facilitated this, they considered themselves businessmen, entrepreneurs, providers of valuable goods to discerning customers. Life as *ryle* was suffering refined to its essence. On farms, enslaved women worked from dark to dark, hauling water from freezing streams, grinding grain until their hands bled, tending animals that were probably treated better than they were. The *Grettir's saga casually describes *ryle* women as cattle without word or will. And that's not poetic exaggeration. That's how they were legally categorized. Property. Tools with legs. And here is the part that really make your stomach turn. Their bodies weren't their own either. Masters could rape enslaved women with complete impunity, and any children born from these assaults were also slaves, unless the father specifically chose to acknowledge them. Most didn't. Why would you, when there was no social pressure, and acknowledging the child meant giving up a future slave? So these women would bear children in bondage, raise them just long enough to watch them become real too, generation after generation born into a status so low it made peasants look like royalty. But wait, there's more degradation to unpack. Some sources hint at practices that make slavery look almost merciful by comparison. Fragments in the sagas and peculiar silences in contemporary chronicles suggest that some captured women faced public rituals of humiliation, designed to obliterate their former identities. While we do and have detailed descriptions, perhaps because even medieval chroniclers found them too disturbing to record fully, scholars have pieced together possibilities from scattered references. Imagine being a noble woman from Northumbria, respected in your community, perhaps educated in a monastery, then capture, then being stripped naked before a jeering crowd of your captors, your hair shorn off with the same casualness you'd shear a sheep, forced to perform degrading tasks while Viking warriors made sport of your humiliation. Not for sexual gratification necessarily, but for something colder, to demonstrate that your former status meant nothing, that noble blood could be made common through sheer will and violence. These rituals, if they occurred as some evidence suggests, served a specific purpose in Viking culture. Honor was everything to the Norse. Their entire social structure revolved around it. So to truly defeat an enemy, you didn't just kill him. You destroyed his **, his reputation, his echo in memory. And what better way to ensure a dead warrior's name turned to ash and to publicly disgrace his wife, to transform her from lady to laughingstock? Some captives might have had their fine clothing replaced with rags or slave collars, been forced to serve at feasts celebrating their husbands' deaths, made to participate in mock ceremonies that parodied their former lives. Every ritual act saying, "You are nothing now, your world is gone, and everyone watching knows it." The psychological warfare was almost more sophisticated than the physical violence, and infinitely more cruel, because it forced the victim to participate in her own erasure. What's perhaps most unsettling is how normalized all of this was. Viking law codes mention **Ryle** as casually as they mention sheep. Archaeological digs in Scandinavia have uncovered slave shackles in household contexts, suggesting enslaved people were as common as pets. Nobody was writing anguished poetry about the morality of slavery. Nobody was questioning whether maybe kidnapping entire families and selling them was perhaps slightly problematic. In their worldview, this was simply how power worked. The strong took from the weak, and the weak existed to be taken from. Your worth was determined entirely by your ability to defend yourself or belong to someone who could defend you. Lose that protection through your husband's death? Congratulations, you just became goods, and the market would determine your value. The legacy of all this didn't just fade when the Viking Age ended. The DNA evidence alone tells a story of systematic conquest that literally rewrote the bloodlines of entire regions. Modern genetic studies in Iceland show significantly more female ancestry from the British Isles than male, which is exactly what you'd expect from a pattern of Viking men taking local women. Those women didn't volunteer for that journey. They were cargo, and their descendants, our contemporaries, carry in their very cells the evidence of these forced integrations, these marriages, these slaveries. History didn't just happen and then politely disappear. It's still here, coded into us, an inheritance of violence that most people don't even know they're carrying. The Vikings didn't just defeat warriors. They conquered futures, perverted lineages, and built their settlements on the broken lives of women whose names we'll never know.